Hello, writers, and welcome to the Author Burnout Coach, the show where we put the publishing industry and all sorts of societal messaging under a microscope. I'm your host, Isabel Sterling, YA author and certified life coach. In each episode, I offer you specific steps that you can take to break up with burnout and reclaim your love of stories. I'm on a mission to dismantle the bookish hustle culture, one writer at a time. I hope you'll join me. Hey writers, welcome to episode 29. Today I'm going to teach you how to enjoy my personal favorite part of the writing process, which is revision. But first, my brain's like, but wait, there's more. But first, I want to celebrate a really cool milestone in my own writing career. I just got my royalty statement for this period. I get them at the end of January and the end of July. And so I just checked the July statement and I found out that my sequel to my debut, so This Coven Won't Break, that's the sequel, it earned out its advance. And I've said it before, if you want to repeat your success, you need to celebrate it. So this is me celebrating. It is so great to earn out on any book, but to do it for a sequel that came out during the beginning of the pandemic and is still selling well 2 years later feels really extra special. I am so proud of these books and the way they've made it into reader hearts all over the world, and here in the US have reached enough readers that it has earned out and royalties are coming in, and that is just so freaking exciting. And if you are listening and you haven't checked out my first series, that's These Witches Don't Burn, and the sequel, This Coven Won't Break, now is a great time to read them. And if you're not so much into the witches and sapphic vampires or more your style, you have to check out The Coldest Touch, obviously, because it's amazing. All right, so let's talk about revision, because revision is how I write books that readers love, and I love it, and I want to help every writer learn to love it. So loving revision is less about finding a specific revision process, though of course, finding a process that works well for your brain absolutely can help. Instead, it's way more about the mindset that you bring to the revision, which probably not a surprise coming from a life coach. So your revision mindset actually starts well before you even get to the revision stage. It starts when you're working on the first draft. How you talk to yourself during that drafting process sets the stage for how you're going to feel about tackling revision once you're done. So if you're writing along and you're thinking things like, this book is a mess, the whole plot is broken, I'll never be able to figure this out, revising this is going to suck, why did I even think I could write a novel? If you're thinking those things, chances are good that when you get to revision, there is going to be a whole lot of dread in your body. And if you remember the model, feeling dread, having dread in our F line, is not going to lead to very helpful actions in our A line. It's much more likely to lead us to procrastinate. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about with F lines and A lines, make sure you go check out episode 11, The Gift of Self-Awareness, where I explain what the model is and how it works. And this is the tool that I use when I'm coaching my clients. So I want you to imagine instead, while you're writing your first draft, you might still have those thoughts where it's all broken and it's terrible. That can probably and will probably still come up. But you notice those and choose instead to think things like, it's okay if I don't know all the details right now. I will totally be able to flesh that out in revision. I'm just gathering up all of the clay so that I have something to sculpt when I revise. That's a hugely different energy, right? And so that brings us to the next stage that can influence your revision process, which is when you have actually finished that first draft, that moment that you finished. And I want you to think about the last time that you finished a novel or what you imagine it might be to finish your first. And what kind of conversation are you having when you're done? Do you take the time to celebrate the fact that you've achieved a really huge milestone in the writing process? And for those of you who, like me, have written multiple books, sometimes we can forget to celebrate. We forget how big a deal it is to finish a book because we've done it so many times, but it's still worth celebrating. And especially if it's your first or second book, really make sure you're making time to celebrate. Like I said, what you celebrate, you put on repeat. So are you doing that, or are you focused on all of the shit that you got wrong and that now you're going to have to fix? Are you excited to bridge the gap between the novel you wrote and the one that you had in your head? Or are you berating yourself for being a shitty writer who couldn't do it right the first time? Those all have very different influences on how you're going to approach revision. And I want to really take a second to see how these thoughts feel. So if you're not driving and it's safe to do so, go ahead and close your eyes, take a deep breath, and I want you to just sort of repeat these thoughts in your head and just see what happens inside your body. So if you think to yourself, this draft is such a mess, it's going to be a nightmare to revise. How does that feel in your body? Where does that feel? What emotion comes up? For me, this thought makes my stomach, when I believe this kind of a thought, I feel really tight and crampy. It brings up a lot of dread, which for me, dread almost always leads to procrastination. So that is not going to be helpful when I sit down to revise. Now, instead, I want you to imagine that very same draft, but instead we think, hey, this draft is a mess, but it's going to be really fun to figure out how to make it work. How does that feel? For me, when I think, it's going to be so fun to figure it out, I get to pull it apart so I can put it back together. To me, those things feel very exciting, feel motivated. I feel curious. I love, for me, my favorite thing is to look at a book as this big, intricate puzzle that I now get to sort of shatter and break apart and then figure out how it fits back together to make an even cooler picture. Now, if instead of feeling excited or motivated, you're feeling kind of nothing when you think it'll be fun to figure out, that's okay. All that means is that you don't believe it. So, how then do you believe that it will be fun to revise? The solution is not to sort of put that thought on repeat and try to bully yourself into believing it. Repeating a mantra like that, one that you don't believe, almost always backfires. So if you think it'll be fun to figure it out and you don't feel anything positive kind of in your body, it just means you don't believe it. And we're not going to then repeat that over and over, because what's really happening when you say something you don't believe is there's this sneaky little voice that comes in that you may not even be super aware of that says, actually, no, it won't be fun to figure out. Stop yelling at me. I want it to be perfect right now. Don't lie to me. There's that voice is kind of going also. And what you feel is the emotion from that. You feel the dread. You feel the impatience. You feel the irritation. You feel the disappointment. So instead of trying to force our brains to believe stuff that it thinks is bullshit, we're going to use something called the thought ladder. Now, a thought ladder works just like it sounds. I want you to imagine a ladder, and you can do this on a piece of paper to really visualize it. And at the bottom of the ladder, you have your current thought that makes you feel shitty and makes it hard to work. So in this case, we're going to use this revision is going to suck. That thought is going to be at the bottom of our metaphorical ladder. And then at the top, which again, you can put this out on paper if you're a visual person, you like to be able to see things. At the top, we have the thought that you want to believe, but you don't. So in this example, again, it'll be so fun to figure this out. So the ladder then has all of these rungs in between our bottom negative thought and our top goal thought. And then on each rung, we're going to place a thought, a different thought, something in between those two that helps us bridge the gap between where we are and where we want to go. So we might go up to the first rung from the bottom, and maybe that one is, it's possible the revision won't suck. It's possible that it won't. And you see how small of a step that is. We're going from it's going to suck to it's possible it won't. We're not going from it sucks to it's amazing. We're not going from it sucks to it's going to be fun. We're just, it's possible that it won't suck. It's maybe it won't. It's just giving ourselves that little bit of wiggle room. And that's all you have to do to start. So every time your brain says, oh, it's going to be terrible, it's going to suck, I'm never going to figure it out, we just counter with, it's possible that it won't suck. It is possible that maybe it won't. And then once that feels really solid, once you're like, yeah, I totally believe that it's possible it won't suck, then we go up just one more step. And maybe the next step is, hey, it's possible that it could be fun. And maybe that feels too far of a step. You get to kind of try it on and see. So if that feels too far, we can go more neutral. Maybe the more neutral version is this revision will probably have parts that are hard and parts that are fun. And if you can believe that more than like it could be fun, hold on to that. And we're just going to practice that for a while. As you're working on your revision and you're getting frustrated, you're like, you know what? It's probably going to have parts that are hard and also parts that are fun. And then you just keep working your way up until you get to a place where you are enjoying the revision. Some other variations could include things like I'm open to the possibility that it could be fun. I'm open to believing it could be fun. It's possible that I'm wrong about how much it will suck. Sometimes, too, it can help to pull it out of your own perspective and to kind of put it on someone else. So you might think something like, well, some writers find revision fun, and it's possible I could be one of them. We can try lots of different things. This is something where we're going to get to play. And you, as a writer, you know how important words are. And so you get to play around with it and figure out, like, what wording do you believe? Like, what, maybe instead of probably, maybe it's possibly. Instead of possibly, maybe it's I'm open to. So you just want to play with it until you see, like, what actually works for you. And you just keep trying them on until you find something that's a little bit better than where you are now. And then you practice that until that becomes automatic. And once you're good there, then you just take one more little step up. We're not jumping up the ladder. We're doing one little rung at a time, as slow as you need to. There is no rush. Once you're actually in the process of revising, we're actually in it now. We're making changes. We're deciding, what subplots to cut or what character arcs we need to smooth out. There are some other mindsets that can cause you trouble. So maybe you're at a point where, you're like, hey, I believe that there's a chance this could be fun. I'm open to finding the fun. You're digging in. There are some other things that can pop up. So I want you to be wary of any time you catch yourself saying the word should. I should do something, or I should have done it differently in the first draft. When you think should, that rarely creates a feeling that helps us tap into our creativity. So things like, well, I should have figured out this world building before I drafted, or I should know this character's backstory by now. It's ridiculous that I'm this far into and I still don't know. So watch out for those things. You don't need to let any of those things be a problem. It's okay to not know. That is why we revise. This is a chance to not be mean to yourself for not knowing, but to get curious and figure out what would the backstory be? If I need the character to think and feel these things, like what could have happened to them to trigger those kinds of thoughts? What did they make it mean when somebody, abandoned them as a child? What specifically went through their head in that moment? How is that influencing them now? And when you decide the backstory, you get to so you've decided it, you figured it out, you've fleshed it out. Now you get to think about, how is that going to influence how they behave? Now that I really know this and have the specifics, how will that shift them, if at all? And if I do shift them in those ways, how will that ripple through the rest of the story? Now, I want to pause here and just sort of let you check in and see how you feel. Because for me, that sort of thought process of like, and then it'll ripple out, and it'll change this and it'll affect that. For me, that's very exciting. I love that shit. That is why I love writing, just to see how all the little pieces fit together and how you can change one thing and it changes the whole trajectory of the rest of the book in a really exciting way. For others of you, it may feel overwhelming to have to think through that many layers of story. I want you to know that it is not objectively overwhelming or objectively fun. These are feelings simply caused by how we think about the process. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, I just want you to ask, okay, but why? Are you thinking that's too much work? Are you thinking I'm not smart enough to do that? Are you thinking that it's too challenging to figure it out? Are you thinking you have to know it all right now? Because the truth is you don't. Even for me, somebody who loves revision, is obsessed with revision, and does really deep work when I get to that stage, it still takes me a number of passes to get all of the pieces in the way that they're meant to be. I don't do it in one pass. I don't think anybody does. So if you're telling yourself and you're feeling overwhelmed because you think you have to figure out every little nuance, you don't. I promise you don't. You have all of the time that you need, especially if you're pre-deadline stage. You can do as many revisions as you need. And each time it can be more fun and you get to get even more nuance. I want to just give you a little bit more insight into sort of my thought process around this because I do find this so exciting. I wanted to share some of the things I think. So for me, I just think there is nothing more exciting in the entire writing process than those moments when you're brainstorming a solution and you figure out this one little piece and it slides in, and it kind of is like, it makes me think of in like movies where if you finally get the right key and something clicks and then like this like big fancy door, like all the little things start to move and click into place. The image I have in my head right now is in like Avatar: The Last Airbender, in the TV show where they would like, put stuff in like, I don't know, I think they blew like fire into like 4 different spots on this door, and then it does all these like funky like swirly things and then it clicks place and it opens up. That's how I think about writing, is when you finally find just that exact thing and it sort of like it all just like clicks into place and then everything starts to whir, like all the gears start to whir and then it's like woo and it all opens up. I love that. I love when I find like one piece of solution and then as I watch how it ripples forward, it fixes like 6 or 7 different things or 3 or 4 different concerns. That moment feels like magic. And knowing that that moment is always possible makes it so much fun for me to allow the brainstorming process to be really low stakes and fun and just to let myself sort of write out all the different ways that something could go. It allows me to take the time to rest when my brain is feeling fried and trust that I'll be able to figure it out if I just play with it long enough. And again, reminding myself and reminding yourself that we're not trying to get this perfect in one round of revision. So I could talk about revision for hours and hours and hours. I literally love it. And if you end up coaching with me, I will happily help you figure out and how to fine tune your own personal revision toolkit and mindset. But for now, I want to leave you with one final shift and sort of tactical approach to revisions. And that is to get your revision plan out of your head and onto paper or note cards or a spreadsheet or whatever. Get it out of your brain. I know I said I was going to focus mostly on mindset. I do want to give some tactical advice here. Novels are long. They basically have infinite moving parts, especially if you consider what's on the page and what's in your head and what's part of previous drafts that you've thrown away and what's part of potential sequels. Like there's a lot of moving parts. Do not do yourself the disservice of trying to remember everything. Part of the process of being able to back up enough from your novel to be able to see the big picture instead of getting lost in just like finessing each individual sentence is the ability to capture the revision plan in a way that's easy to see the whole story. It's easy to manipulate and to move around as you figure out the missing pieces, and then provides you very clear directions. So when you do get into the manuscript, you can look at what you've prepped and it'll tell you exactly what to do. So I'm going to kind of walk you through how I do that. And of course, always adjust things so that they work with your brain. If you love to touch things, if you are very tactile, break out the index cards and be able to move things and touch them and play with sticky notes. All of that is great. Color code, awesome. Love that. That's how I used to do it. I used to do every scene on an index card. I have now since had to switch to using like a Google Sheet because my pets are all assholes and they eat all of my papers. So it has had to go virtual. But it can be index cards. It can be an Excel sheet. It can be just a bulleted list in Word. Whatever allows you to see as much of your story as possible at a glance instead of having to look at the whole like 80,000 words. I like to do that first. I kind of will like skip through. For me, it's easy because I write in Scrivener, so I can sort of just like see kind of like what each scene is and like glance through it very quickly just to create that list. And also these days I tend to create it as I write also. So I have my Excel kind of going as I'm writing and I adjust it as I go. So when I'm done writing, I have that already. Like I know sort of what's happened in the book. But totally fine if you don't have that. You just do that first. Then go through and read the book and do not let yourself touch the actual words on the page. And this is really what helps you step back. We're not fixing typos. We're not fixing commas. We're not fixing an awkward sentence. We are stepping way back and just looking at the big picture issues. And then you're just making a list. There will be decisions that you need to make that are going to require you to do some brainstorming. There might be a subplot you have to delete. You're just making a list of all of the things. There might be a character that you added halfway through that you now need to bring them in earlier. Maybe a character changed names or changed genders. Like you keep track of all those big things. And then once you're done reading and you have that full list, then you can go in and start actually doing the actual brainstorming to figure out the solutions. I really do recommend, unless your brain hates it, of course, always, go with what's going to make your brain happy because a happy brain is more likely to work. But I find it really helpful to have gone through made a list of all of the issues before I try to fix things, because I might see how different pieces fit together and one solution kind of fixes all of it, like I kind of mentioned. As you're doing this, again, mindset is everything. Watch for any unhelpful thinking, like, I'll never get this. I should have done this correctly the first time. See that stuff come up and just say, like, hey, that is just a bullshit thought. That is not true. I just have to try. And then I like to write out longhand and sort of free write. And I will literally write by like, if I like, be like, well, I could do this. And then I'll be like, nope, that actually won't work. And here are the reasons why. And then my notes are truly very just like stream of consciousness. It'll be like, ooh, and if I do that, then this could happen. I just let all of that come out. It's not formal. It's just messy and fun. And then once I kind of have figured out the solution, it might take me 3 or 4 pages of handwriting to figure out the solution. And then I go put it somewhere, usually in like a Word doc, so that it's easier to find later. So then once you've done all that and you've got all of your solutions, I like to mark where I'm going to implement them in the manuscript. And I do that based on where I've sort of done my, I guess, outline, you could call it. So if you're using index cards and sticky notes, so you know, like, in this scene, this is where I'm going to start doing this piece to fix the character arc. Do that all the way through. Again, animals are jerks that rip up all of my papers, so I've shifted to digital. So I now have a spreadsheet, and I have a column that's like the one sentence of what happens in the scene, and then I have different columns for like different things I need to fix in that scene. So when I get to the actual fixing, all I have to do is look at that one line. Just that one line. I don't have to hold the whole book in my head. It's just that one line. And by doing this, by being really big picture instead of sort of trying to dive in and fix things as you go, you get a much more holistic view of the manuscript and what needs to change to bring it closer to your vision. And then when it's time to actually revise, you're just looking at that one scene, at those sticky notes or at those, notes in your Excel file, and I'm just going to do what past me said. While of course leaving room for if present me has even better ideas. So if I can get you to only do one thing from this episode of this podcast, I really recommend finding a way to get this work out of your head and written down somewhere. And then bonus, write down the thoughts that come up, the thoughts that, make it feel hard to revise. I don't get this. It's too complicated. Like all of those thoughts, write them down and then challenge them. Are they actually true? What else is true? It is hard enough to manage your brain when it's telling you that you suck at writing. We don't need to make it even harder by trying to manage our brain and also hold an entire novel and all of the changes you need to make in your brain too. All right, writer friends, revision is such a huge topic. This is just a little insight into kind of watching what your brain is saying to you about the process, and then also getting all of your ideas and notes out of your brain and onto paper so you don't have to remember all of them. That's all I have for today. Until next time, I want to wish you both happy writing and very specifically, happy revising. Bye, friends. Ready to break up with burnout? I can show you how. With my unique blend of book and life coaching, I help writers craft stories they love, all without the imposter syndrome and perfectionism that gets in the way. Go to isabelsterling.com/coaching to learn more and schedule your free consultation. Until next week, happy writing.